Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, welcome back, Brewer fans. This is a Brew Crew Review Podcast. Joining me today is Vince, and hopefully Scott will be along soon to save Christmas, as we're just before the holiday season. How are you doing today, Vince?
I'm doing great, Craig. Great to, spend a little time talking baseball today as we head into the next few busy days of between Christmas and New Year's. So, excited to take a little time to talk some baseball today.
Absolutely. And, of course, the winter meetings came and went, and it was pretty uneventful for the Brewers' standpoint. They did not select anyone in the Rule 5 draft, nor did they lose anyone. And there hasn't been any trades here during the hot season as of yet, or signings for that matter. But I guess what are your thoughts on? A few of the former Brewers actually have signed elsewhere. I know that Alex Claudio just signed with another team. Is that correct, Vince?
Yeah, he signed with the Angels, Craig. With the Brewers lose a left-handed reliever who, despite, I think his numbers are fairly pedestrian, and I don't know that he was necessarily someone that the Brewers were looking to long-term in the bullpen. He did actually throw a lot, for the Brewers. So we are going to have to find a way to replace Claudio, just in terms of, somebody needs to take those innings, going forward in the bullpen, and ideally it'd be a lefty.
Yeah, absolutely.
It should be pointed out that a guy like Claudio, his value had to have gone down to a team like the Brewers just a little bit. I guess it didn't go down enough for another team like the Angels not to be interested. But ever since the 3-batter minimum, went into effect in 2020, it limits a guy who previously had been a loogie, a one-batter, maybe two-batter guy that a left-handed pitcher would face, just bringing in someone like Claudio to only face left-handed hitters in games. So, it's interesting how some of the new rules that Major League Baseball has chosen to adopt has led to guys, I think, losing some value, and Claudio, I think, certainly fits that category.
Yeah, and we have signed a few guys recently on a minor league deal. It looks like we signed a right-handed pitcher, Luis Perdomo, formerly of the Padres. He's right-handed pitcher, bullpen arm, only 27 years old, but not too exciting. He had an ERA over 5.71 last year.
And unless I'm mistaken, I think it was our anonymous source, Tom Carter, who told me that Perdomo won't even be pitching at all in 2021. He's actually injured. So this was just to gain the rights to him for 2022 and to be able to offer him arbitration, would presumably, if his rehab is going well. So I don't think that he's going to be throwing, an inning for Milwaukee next year. And, again, he wasn't great, but Claudio threw in 103 games for the Brewers over the course of 2 years, our interns are telling me. So, something to keep in mind. The Brewers will certainly be on the market for somebody, presumably a left-hander, who can eat that many innings for the Brewers. 103 games in 2 years. And of course, one of those years was this year, 2020, where we only played 60 games.
No, we did have Angel Perdomo. I'm not sure if he's in relation to Luis or not. I assume not, but maybe there's some connection there. But he's a left-handed pitcher, still also in his 20s, that really didn't log very many innings for the Brewers last year. But I think he still has some potential to maybe be a bullpen piece. But he's also, someone with minor league options. So we'll see what we have there. A couple other signings we just claimed today from the Seattle Mariners off waivers. Tim Lopes, again, not terribly exciting, but he's kind of like a utility infielder, a little bit of a journeyman, but I don't really feel that he has the potential to fill starting position, even though he does play some third base. But I think that's more of just like a depth thing, or possibly, invite him to spring training and see what happens type of thing if he can compete. I know that he was kind of a little bit of a fan favorite for the Mariners, but again, not too exciting with signing. So with that said, I mean, it's really tough to foresee what the Brewers are going to be doing this offseason. Obviously, there's still a lot of offseason left, and we'll see. But I mean, we talked about this our last podcast, but I really don't think that there's going to be too many earth-shattering free agent signings. I mean, I think if there's anything earth-shattering that's going to happen at all this offseason, will probably be a possible trade of Josh Hader. And so I'm not really sure, but
well, Craig, do you think that part of the reason that why I think that this offseason has been slow for many teams, not just the Brewers, is all the COVID stuff, just the uncertainty in the market. Teams not sure if we're going to be playing 162 games. I hope that we are. I presume that we are in 2021. But there were, since our last taping, there was one unnamed owner who had a quote that the season would start in May and that it would be a shortened season and all this stuff. So I just wonder if this uncertainty is what's causing, this sort of just reluctance for GMs or teams to get involved on the market. I guess it's hard to plan for a season that you don't really know what to expect with. So my guess is that that's what's leading to the slowness. And my question for you, though, is that market uncertainty going to lead the Brewers to end up keeping Josh Hader? So rather than making a big splashy trade, trading a franchise icon like Hader, do you wait until there's some stability in the market, or do you try to take advantage of other teams not really wanting to invest in free agents to trade for a guy who isn't going to cost a ton of money in Josh Hader?
Great questions, Vince. I guess I'll start with the Hader part of the question, and that's you're very indeed correct that COVID is having a major impact on this offseason for a lot of teams. I think that they're really starting to feel the trickle-down effects of the economic impact it did have, and a lot of owners, especially of small market teams, are really saying, you know what, we got to cut some costs here and cut down some payroll, and are looking to trade guys that are too expensive. If you look at the Cincinnati Reds, they're already starting to, they didn't re-sign Trevor Bauer, and they're looking to trade some more salary. I know that they're even shopping Sonny Gray, and there's even rumors that they're shopping their other controllable ace, Luis Castillo. So I think the impact is real, and I think it possibly will affect any type of Josh Hader market for this offseason. And therefore, luckily, the Brewers do still have 3 years of team control over him. And even though he'll get a little bit expensive for us, I think that, it's very possible we could look to trade him at the deadline, which I think makes the most sense. A lot of times,
right,
playoff teams that are, wanting to make that push really are looking for bullpen arms, especially someone like Hader. So that could probably maximize a return. But next offseason would be an option too, and there's also the option of keeping him, but we'll see. But I think that I was fairly confident we might get rid of him this offseason. And since our last podcast, I guess because of what the market looks like, my guess would be that the Brewers aren't going to find what they're looking for in return for him, and therefore he'll probably start the 2021 season as a Milwaukee Brewer if I had to guess. So that's probably a good thing for fans to hear.
Yeah, no, and you might be right about the deadline too. Last year the Brewers were sort of on that. I mean, last year was 2020 was just such a weird year where you had, all sorts of teams making the playoffs that never would have, but the Brewers were, even with that scenario, kind of on the bubble of whether they were going to be a playoff team or not. And David Stearns ends up trading David Phelps to the Phillies for 3 players. I mean, they weren't high-level guys. They weren't necessarily top 10 prospects, but at the same time, to get 3 players for a guy like David Phelps at the deadline, it does lead one to think that perhaps the return for Josh Hader at the deadline to a contending team, might be very significant. So, and that obviously goes without saying that if the Brewers are in it at the deadline, then, Josh Hader is far less likely to be dealt. And I will say too, from a on the field competitive standpoint, to have a guy like Josh Hader and Devin Williams at the back end of your bullpen would not be a bad combo for any team in Major League Baseball right now. So it is worth watching, of course, and it's fun to talk about. But I don't necessarily think that a move for trading Hader is necessarily imminent. I think that the Brewers really have to be blown away, and the reason I think it's less likely is just because I don't think teams are going to be willing to blow somebody away with just all these market uncertainties. We've got all sorts of things that we don't know yet about the 2021 baseball season, and will there be fans? Won't there be fans? Will it start on time? What will spring training look like? I mean, there's still a ton of stuff to be worked out, and just that uncertainty is really volatile for any market, let alone Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak a little bit to the comment that rumor that floated out there that possibly the owners would be hoping to start the season in May rather than traditionally the beginning of April, late March, beginning of April.
Yeah.
Obviously, that would be an economic reasons for that. Whether or not, normally April does not have a lot of fans and stands due to weather across the nation or whatnot. But you combine that with the fact that COVID, that there might very well maybe a full mask mandate going on during that month. And so I think that they're probably looking at, just start, they don't want to pay the salaries of the players at full pay for those games in April when they're not going to be giving the best revenue. And I just don't think this is going to fly with the Players Association. I think that they've already showed they played last season under similar conditions, and they were able to pull it off. And I don't think that that's going to, to me, this is a bad sign that there's going into the next labor agreement, which ends at the end of this next upcoming season. It could get really ugly. Right. It just seems like the owners and the Players Association are nowhere near on the same page with anything. And a lot of times these
No, go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say these rumors seem to be leaked through the media instead of like being dealt directly Players Association to MLB owners. And I don't know. I normally don't agree with Scott Boras, but he spoke recently again that, the owners aren't losing money, but they are losing profits. There's a difference. And of course, to them, that's the same thing. But in reality, in my opinion, it's the owners that, normally make plenty of money that they might have to stomach a little bit of the losses here. But of course, they're going to want to trickle that down to the players. But I think it'd be a real travesty for them to have a abbreviated 2021 season when, as you see, all the other sports, including the NFL right now, is getting in their full seasons without fans or with abbreviation number of fans. So.
Yeah, no, okay. So a couple things. I think that yes, the owners generally are, they're wrong about this. Let me just say that. I think that the season should start on time if you can do so safely, and that's been proven to be something that they can do. We did get a 60-game season in 2020. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And you really didn't see the spike in cases that people had, at first worried about. There was a couple teams that at the beginning, the Cardinals and the Marlins that, went through some stuff. But, we've advanced, I hope, to the point where we understand sort of what needs to happen in order to keep people safe and what players need to be willing to do, to maintain themselves in a safe way so that they're not spreading it to their teammates, et cetera. I don't know if I fully agree with Scott Boras' point. Yes, that it does cut into profits, probably more so than actual budgets, but they have to rely on revenue from fans in order to pay their players, so I do think that there is something to that. But I guess my overall point is that I think that the reason why this was leaked to the media is simply because it is a negotiating tactic. As you pointed out, the collective bargaining agreement expires after the 2021 season. And I tend to think that the owners will eventually concede on this point in, terms of starting the season on time, knowing it's kind of a foregone conclusion, but they can almost gain some goodwill with the players union by giving in on this point. And then they could probably get concessions in other aspects of negotiations. So I tend to think of this as more of a business negotiation tactic, more than anything concrete or specific to when the season will actually start. I mean, there's a schedule that's already been published. I think that, most of the players most of the fans would want some sort of regularity, even if it meant that fans weren't allowed in for the first, month or 2 months or whatever it is of the season. So I tend to think of this as more of a negotiating tactic than anything else.
Yeah, you're most likely right.
And really quick, it should also be pointed out that those comments came anonymously from one owner, which, means that it wasn't like a spokesman for the ownership group or the commissioner talking about this. It was, one unattributed quote to one owner, so I think that that's really what kind of stood out to me, that, perhaps this one owner is just attempting to gain some leverage for the owners in a negotiation, but it wasn't anything concrete.
Yeah, that's good to point out that this isn't, something that was actually proposed, but more of a rumor. So let's all hope that doesn't happen, as we'd all love to see a full 2021 season, of course, with fans in the stands at some point as well. And I think that will happen. So hopefully things get all back to normal within a year or so, as we're all looking forward to a better 2021 overall. But like we harken back to the beginning of the podcast and know that there's going to be a major economic fallout throughout baseball for that. I mean, you can see it now. Free agents are not going to be getting the money that they would have pre-pandemic during this offseason. And so teams like the Brewers, one of the smallest markets in baseball, are definitely, not out looking to go out and spend money. With that being said, we do have some holes especially in our offensive side of our team building. And I mean, the most glaring hole to me is really third base. We have some issues at catcher, issues at first. We did re-sign, as we pointed out, Dan Vogelback, and he could most likely fill in some innings at first. But also, I think since our last podcast, it's been pretty much solidified that there won't be a DH in 2021. So that really, throws a wrench into things too, and means that if Vogelback gets starts, he's probably going to be at first base. So are there any particular free agents that you, I guess, are on your Christmas wish list? I know we usually do something like that this time of year.
Ryan Braun would be one. I mean, I would love to see him back even without the DH. I think he could split time with Vogelbach at first. It's not perfect, but it's something, and then you try to upgrade last year's production by getting a third baseman that can hit. I worry right now because we have no offensive production from either of our corner infield spots unless you think that Vogelbach, can really be kind of the 2019 first half version of himself. I don't know if I see that. So if you have to save money, you try to platoon maybe Braun and Vogelbach at first. It's not a long-term answer, but maybe for next season, it's what you get away with. But I'm really worried about our offense overall. We don't know really what we have in Omar Narvaez. I hope that he has better numbers than he did last year. His track record would suggest that's possible, but not a for sure thing. But if you look at him from last year, we've got an incredibly weak offensive catcher. We've got really no idea what to expect at first base and no real starter at this point. And our third base spot is just completely void of anyone. And our most productive third baseman last year, Jed Jorko, is a free agent. And even he, I think, was adequate at best. So, I think the third base is an incredible hole for this team.
No, yeah, and so that's one I'm focusing on. I know on my Christmas wish list is Jake Lamb, who again most likely passes prime, but I think he could be a change of scenery candidate. Where if he got regular at bats, coming off a couple of injury riddled seasons, he could be a productive hitter once again at the hot corner. So he's in his left-handed hitter. He's at the top of my list, but I know Scott. He's busy saving Christmas right now and dealing with some flooding issues at his home in the desert, but anyway,
doesn't he live on the second story?
Yeah, I don't know. He's definitely got some problems going on, but no, I mean, I know one player that's on top of his wish list is actually Marcus Simeon from the A's. Now he's a shortstop normally by trade, but he has some experience at third as well. And I think Scott was hoping that he'd possibly sign as either a shortstop and then to move to play shortstop and then or third base for the Brewers going into the.
What do you do with Luis Urias?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's got some. His name escaped me for a second, but Urias has some experience at short, third, and second also himself. So I think those guys could be interchangeable. That between the two of them, one would take short, one would take third, and then of course we've got Orlando Arcia, who's also back on a one-year deal to fill in as a backup shortstop also. So I think between the three of those guys, they would kind of cover third base and shortstop. And I think that Simeon, 2 years ago, he was, I think, third in AL MVP voting, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, he was.
He's still really a good hitter and would really help our offense. And he also is someone who normally would be looking at a normal offseason, a pretty nice multi-year deal to kind of solidify himself going forward. But MLB trade rumors projected that he'd most likely only get a one-year deal.
He needs that's probably just as a make good year though, Craig. He had 223 last year. He had a 305 OBP, and it was a weird year, but he had 25 walks and 50 strikeouts, and his numbers have never been great in terms of his strikeout to walk ratio. So, just something to consider. He's definitely a free swinger.
Yeah. But I think he could be had on a 1-year deal around 10 to 12 million, in my opinion. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It may be costing a little bit more than that for him, but again, he may have other suitors as well. But that's just one name I know Scott liked. And looking at the free agent third baseman list, it's pretty depressing, and there isn't really very many people on it. So it's hard for me, unless we do make a trade for a third baseman, hard to see, who's going to be playing there for us. But we shall see. And I think that, we're also probably going to address a little bit more our bullpen. And I would think that we're going to add at least one veteran starter also, if not more than one, going into this year. But we'll see. But again, I'm not expecting a big off season and spending for the Brewers. I mean, last year, I know we described it as dumpster diving or bargain bin shopping, and it kind of didn't work out too well. The Brewers did sneak into the playoffs because of the expanded format, but really it was not that great of a season. And a lot of our players, had off years, especially Christian Yelich, but because of the shortened season and the lack of spring training and all that good stuff, I think it was kind of like a mulligan of a year, even though we didn't make the playoffs. But I'm really hoping for some rebounds from some guys, and I think we will see that. But with that being said, I think we definitely need to add a bat. So someone like a Simeon would I think definitely upgrade our offense, and I'm hoping the Brewers, if they do anything, that they spend their money on the offensive side this season.
Well, yeah, it's interesting with the starting pitcher. I'm curious if we are going to get into the market or to bidding for a starting pitcher, why we didn't go after somebody like a Lance Lynn. There've been a few guys on the board this year already that have, I think, signed for very reasonable contracts, and I just don't know what we're waiting for if we are going to indeed go after a starting pitcher.
Yeah, like a couple of names came off the board that I kind of like. Michael Wacha signed a 1-year, $6 million deal.
Yeah, Michael Wacha
with the Rays, which I thought was very reasonable, obviously. And he's on the plus side of 30 still. So I mean, he would have been a good signings. There are a couple other veterans out there that could still sign. I know Taijuan Walker, Garrett Richards are still out there. A couple of right-handers who again aren't totally past their prime yet. But it wouldn't surprise me if indeed, we mostly focus on the offensive side and possibly rely on some of the guys that we have already, on the team. More specifically, Eric Lauer will probably get an extended shot in the rotation, possibly Freddie Peralta once again. And then I don't know, I think we're still going to see what Josh Lindblom will offer us in the rotation as well. So I think that the Brewers probably could go in 2021 season without adding a starting pitcher per se, but I think they kind of need to for depth, especially a veteran coming in. Maybe even someone, I know I used to beat the drum on this years ago, but maybe even someone like Cole Hamels, like a veteran toward the tail end of his career, but someone that could offer, a decent presence.
Gregors, you've been wanting him since we started this show in 2004.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Now he's injury prone and past his prime, but anyway. So So again, the Brewers very rarely build a team like I would necessarily, but I'm pretty excited that the Brewers' young core, with Yelich and Hira, and of course on the starting rotation with Burns and Woodruff toward the top of the rotation is a good core to kind of build off of. So I think the Brewers have some nice pieces in place that, especially 20 years ago, we didn't have players like that even on our team. I mean, our best player was like Jeff Cirillo, who hopefully is listening. Yeah. Hopefully he's listening in actually to this, but he was a great player at the time. But again,
he did follow us on Twitter just this past week, Craig. I actually meant to announce that earlier. I was pretty excited to see that our interns who monitor our social media accounts informed me that Jeff Cirillo is now officially a Brew Crew Review follower on Twitter.
Yeah, that's why I can give him a little bit of shout out here. But so I don't know. Scott, I was hoping would join us, but it looks like he's having a hard time saving Christmas this year. He's probably getting vaccinated or vaccinating.
Maybe
the healthcare
giving
workers.
the vaccinations. Yeah, he's probably giving the vaccinations or funding it. I mean, he does such great work usually, so it's exciting to talk about. Although I do wish he would just join us for a few minutes here. I know it's difficult, but
yeah. a difficult, busy season. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much all I've got. I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to talk about here, Vince, but
Well, I thought we could touch really quick on a big announcement from Major League Baseball since our last podcast, and that was to include the Negro Leagues in as an official former major league. And I think that that's just kind of interesting from a historical point of view, a statistical point of view. I was actually looking earlier today, and I was hoping that Hank Aaron, who played in the Negro Leagues for one season, would have had enough home runs to overtake Barry Bonds as the all-time home run king in Major League Baseball. Bonds ended his career with 763. Unfortunately, Hank Aaron hit only 5 home runs in his lone season in the Negro League. So if these numbers are indeed added to Major League totals, he ends up with 760 home runs and is 5 home runs short of 3 home. I can't do math. 3 home runs short of Barry Bonds still, with the addition of those 5 home runs. So I do think that it is long overdue. I just wanted to go on record and say that, and I do think it's worth noting on our podcast because it does affect our the way that we perceive the Negro Leagues and their impact on Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's really cool that Major League Baseball decided to recognize them as such. There's been some great players, of course, as you said, even Hank Aaron, that have gone through those leagues, and again, much overdue recognition, definitely on their part. One other thing I also remember that we haven't touched on is the Brewers have a new AAA affiliate, and it's an old friend site, and that's the Nashville Sounds will be the AAA affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers 2021. And I know that last year they were with San Antonio, which is you're going to be living kind of down in that area most likely, Vince. And unfortunately, I think you're a little bit not too happy about the move in the AAA affiliate. But
very selfishly, Craig, just because was excited to be able to check out another season of Brewers AAA baseball. But I'd flown down to San Antonio a few times and had seen the Missions play and really enjoyed it. And it was a fun atmosphere and all. But no, that's purely selfish. I'm excited because the Brewers are now going to be moving into a fairly new stadium in Nashville, in a place with a long history of affiliation with the Brewers. And, even on a personal level, you and Scott and Chad and myself, we all have great memories, I think, of our times in Nashville when we first started this show and interviewing up-and-coming Brewers prospects at that time, Giovanni Chiardo and Ryan Braun and Prince Fielder and Nelson Cruz and, that whole crop of guys that really came of age in 2005 to 2011 and led the Brewers to 2 postseason runs. So, no, I think it's good. I think it's exciting and would love to plan a trip. But we'll have to talk to Doug about our press passes being reinstated after Scott's drinking in the press box. But, maybe he can let it slide now since it's been over a decade.
Absolutely. And maybe, as you pointed out, maybe Tim Dillard would be willing to re-sign with us. I know he spent some time with the Milwaukee Milkmen, even down the street from my house here in Franklin this year. But hopefully he can make his way back to the minor leagues. That'd be great. But
yeah, when he does, hopefully we get the exclusive scoop on it too, Craig. That's something to look forward to.
Awesome. And also just to point out that unfortunately the Brewers didn't really even have the option to stay in San Antonio because of Major League Baseball's complete minor league overhaul and reshuffling of teams and franchises. San Antonio was actually reclassified to AA affiliate. So the Brewers didn't really even have the option to stay there as a AAA team. So they had to move. And unfortunately, it's like a musical chairs of the AAA team shuffling around, and Nashville was the last chair left, and the Brewers ended up back there. So I'm fine with it, and it's kind of exciting actually. So, but anyway, and again, I feel so bad for all the minor league players who had a really difficult 2021 season. They either, didn't get to play at all or played just, not competitive baseball in the 2021 season. And that's really sucks for a development of a young player to have to endure a full year of that. When, basically the baseball is their entire life. So hopefully they get back on track in 2021 and moving forward, minor league baseball is still a great thing here in America. So, all right, well, that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully everyone has a happy and healthy holiday season as we move into 2021, and I'm expecting the Brewers to make some moves here in the next couple of weeks. I know Scott will be all fired up about rejoining us on the next podcast. He's been pretty busy, man, as of lately, but I'm sure we'll have him back in the fold here shortly. So you listeners, the longtime listeners of the Brew Review, can definitely look forward to that, as I'm definitely hyping that up.
Yeah, absolutely. The return of Scott Bartell. And just as a quick reference, if you want to give us a follow on Twitter, we always appreciate it. Brew Crew Review 1 on Twitter. Please email any questions for our podcast to Brew Crew Review podcasts with an S at gmail.com. And we'll be sure to answer your questions as quickly as we can.
All right. Well, I hope our GMs, David Stearns and Matt Arnold, are busy on those phones here during the holiday season and get us some Christmas present in the form of new Brewers for the 2021 season. So thanks again, all you fans listening out there. Thanks for joining me, Vince, and go Brewers.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Scott. All right, go Brewers. Stay classy, Wisconsin. Do, 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 do.